Thank you, Joseph, for making us cry this morning. That was very moving. Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting. It's 7:20. It's afternoon time in Ukraine, where Joseph Lindsley is. Joe, reading the headlines out of Ukraine this morning. Ukraine claims small advances in the east, says Russian forces remain mostly on the defensive. What are you hearing there today?
Well, Bob, good afternoon from LVIV here in western Ukraine. And it's been this morning, there were many alarms. I think the first one was at about 6 o'clock. This morning, nationwide air alarms, but nothing happened in most Ukrainian cities during those alarms this morning. And today, these days, today is about 72 degrees, blue sky day here, breezy day in Lviv. Such a beautiful day. I've been traveling in Kharkiv for so long, so I'm back here, and every block, I see people I know sitting at cafes or people waving hello from their shops, and it seems so peaceful. I stopped in a bookshop and I bought a copy of Ernest Hemingway's Snows of Kilimanjaro in Ukrainian, so I can practice the Ukrainian language. You have these moments of where you it feels like a dream where everything is so calm, but yet through the night, the Russians sent about 24 drones to Ukraine. These are the Iranian suicide drones. They're called Shahid, which means martyr. And they were launched from the Crimean Peninsula, which is Ukrainian territory that the Russians have occupied since 2014. And it's pretty dramatic what happened. Every day is dramatic here. But what happened through last night, the Russians hit the Ukrainian port town of Ismail. That's a very exotic name, just like Captain Ishmael in Moby Dick. Ismail is located at the confluence of the Danube River and the Black Sea. It's named for a Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire. There's so many different empires that sort of pass through those cities and that region. It's in the region called Bessarabia, southwest of Odessa. And because of the Russian blockade on the ports of Mykolaiv and Odessa, and because the Russians occupy all of Ukraine's coast along the Sea of Azov, including Mariupol, the Danube Delta is Ukraine's only place where they can export via water. And Romania, which is on the other side of the river from Ukraine, agreed to help Ukraine export grain. So Ukrainians will take grain on trains and trucks down through Bessarabia and then put them on barges at the Danube River right across from Romania. On Sunday, ships from countries including Israel and Greece were able to kind of break the Russian blockade and sort of sneak up the coastline into the Danube Delta. And so that's why what happened last night was incredibly, we could say, risky from Russia. They hit the town of Ishmael, the city of Ishmael. They hit grain storage facilities there. They hit the maritime the headquarters of the Maritime Port Authority in Ishmael. And there were photos from directly across the Danube River from the Romanian side. And Romania is a European Union country. Romania is a NATO country. And the Russians hit within sight of Romania. And, we've seen so often in this war, very often missiles and drones can be inaccurate. And especially when air defense is trying to swat them down. But even without that, they can be very inaccurate. So this was so close to NATO territory, and it was successful. They did destroy some of the infrastructure there in Ishmael. And ever since the Russians have, since they stopped that the grain deal which had allowed Ukrainians to export for almost a year through the Black Sea, Russia has been aggressively hitting food supply and ports. And so again, we see that this is Russia's only intention to do everything they can to break Ukraine. And another disturbing thing happened yesterday as well. The Polish Defense Ministry confirmed that 2 Belarusian helicopters violated Polish airspace. They allegedly during training exercises flew over Polish territory. Again, a NATO country, a European Union country. So we're seeing some kind of new, we could say maybe a new aggression. Meanwhile, Iceland closed its embassy in Moscow. They said they really don't see a point in continuing that charade. And I think these events, force the big question. And the question, for example, last night here on the cobbled streets of Lviv, I was talking with American and Ukrainian friends, and the Americans asked, how long do you think this is going to continue? And everyone has different theories about it and different levels of optimism. But the resounding idea is that, the Ukrainians will keep fighting no matter what. But the question the Ukrainians have and Ukrainian supporters have is, when will those in the West decide that they really believe that in Ukrainian victory and decide to agree to give Ukraine the long-range weapons to put a stop to this? And again, like those drone attacks through the night came from the Crimean Peninsula, which technically and even officially and unofficially, the United States has discouraged Ukraine from attacking any Russian base in Crimea. As long as Ukrainians can't do that, these attacks are going to continue. And as we saw through the night, these attacks are perilously close to NATO territory.
The reason for not supplying those long-range weapons is the fear of an escalating war. What do you say to that?
Well, and that's what they say. And when I quoted the Czech defense, the Czech military, their statement last week, this is the language that Russia uses because they want the world to be afraid. We've seen, Russia has done everything they can to win it. And, it's those first 3 days when they thought they could take Kyiv, they've used every tool that they can to get victory, and they've been unable to do that. And so, but if you look back at the rhetoric from a year ago, before, say, some of the great weapons arrived from the United States, like the HIMARS, the high mobility rocket launchers. Before those arrived, everyone was talking about escalation. Oh, if we give Ukraine too many weapons, we're going to escalate things. I don't think you could have more escalation than that attempt at a blitzkrieg that happened those first 3 days in late February 2022. And so this is, I think the question, from my experience working with people in Washington and the other, the people in Brussels and London and Berlin, do they want to kind of live in this gray in between where this thing just continues and carries on? Or do they really believe in making a decisive push for victory? And whatever you want to call that. But it's the Ukrainians are doing the fight. They're bleeding out. And even, we do have some positive indications of some ground gained, very little bit. But in the counteroffensive, it's very steady. But even as that happens, as we see, and also, by the way, Kyiv was attacked last night. Air defense did intercept all of the drones, but Ukraine needs more air defense, but most especially an ability to hit Russia. And I think this is the sort of the philosophical question that has to be debated. And that's the thing. It's not even debated in public, in our Congress, that they're not discussing this. And I think they really need to have a fierce and open debate on what actually the objectives are of the West. And what does victory mean? Right now, too much of that happens behind closed doors. I do know there is some debate about this in the corridors of the Pentagon, but they do not have this serious debate. They're not having it in public. And I think that's a disservice, not just to Ukrainians, but to the whole world, because we can prolong this, but in a way that causes only more suffering and gives Russia more time to strategize and to resupply.
Yeah, and unfortunately, heading into the presidential election, I think politics gets in the way of a lot of these discussions we should be having, where it should be just about the facts. One other thing before we let you go today, Joe, you paint a scary picture of what goes on there on a daily basis, and yet you travel frequently. You mentioned you've been traveling lately. You go from city to city. Are a lot of people doing that?
Yeah, in fact, the trains are booked. People are moving around the country. If they get a chance to take a few days to get some rest in the Carpathian Mountains in the West, people have business meetings. Even here in Lviv, I just met people who were here in Kharkiv or came here from Kharkiv for business. And society is continuing. The trains run on time. You can't fly, of course, internally, but there is this great dynamic spirit of people keep going. People are afraid. They admit their fear. But they keep moving on. And a quick positive note, that a Chicagoan, Jim Gamache from Aurora, Illinois, he came here to volunteer. He had a fundraiser at the Stonebridge Country Club in Aurora. They've already raised $17,000 for the Frontline Kitchen, for Razom for Ukraine, and for our Ukrainian Freedom News. to get supplies to the front lines. So thank you to the loyal Chicago audience.
Love hearing that. And on that positive note, we'll say take care until tomorrow.
Until tomorrow. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.